First signs, a quiet descent into madness. The first sign of trouble came not with alarms or flashing lights, but with a silence so profound that it unsettled even the seasoned crew of Zarin's Wrath. Commander Vectel of the Vaughn Dominion stood tall on the command deck, his sleek silver exoskeleton reflecting the cold light of distant stars. Below them, Earth spun in serene ignorance, a blue-green jewel lost at the ragged edge of a forgotten spiral arm. Vectel folded his forearms behind his back, his sharp mandibles twitching in faint amusement. Earth, another primitive world, barely scratching the surface of stellar flight, hardly worth a footnote in the conquest ledgers of the Dominion. First Officer Grill, ever efficient and emotionless, rattled off his preliminary report with clinical detachment. Scanners detect no planetary shield, no defense arrays, no advanced propulsion networks. Surface technology is pre-fusion level. Minimal orbital debris primitive. Vectel smirked, his thin mouth plates parting slightly. A cleanup operation then, routine, forgettable. Yet the hum of space around them felt different, like stepping into a room where something terrible had happened long ago, but the walls still remembered. It wasn't mechanical interference. It was something older, deeper, woven into the fabric of reality itself. The science officers logged minor anomalies in their consoles, subtle shifts in gravitational harmonics, electronic glitches in redundant systems, but no one paid them serious mind. After all, they had conquered far greater civilizations than this. Still, there was one oddity that lingered at the edge of Vectel's mind, refusing to be dismissed. The probe, a human artifact, they called it Voyager, still drifting on a trajectory that had carried it beyond its home system. Against all expectation, this relic had contained not just maps and greetings, but a signal, an invitation. Grill presented the data, his tone as dry as ever. A primitive broadcast encoded within the probe, a celebration of their existence, art, music, mathematics. Vectel laughed quietly, a call to the stars from creatures who cannot even walk among them. He watched the live feed from the orbiting drones, humans bustling like insects across their cities, oblivious to the silent titan hanging above them. So fragile, so unaware. This is an opportunity, Vectel declared to his bridge crew, a chance to remind the galaxy of our supremacy. We shall answer their call. Unnoticed by all, deep within the Dominion's vast archives, automated warning subroutines blinked to life, ancient flags from conquered worlds now long extinguished. Cryptic entries referenced Earth not as an infant civilization but as something dangerous, something deliberately erased from memory. Warnings couched in myth and madness. But Vectel, drunk on his own invincibility, never saw the flags. He only saw conquest and the hunger for another feather in his crown. As Zarin's Wrath slipped silently into Earth's orbit, cloaked against the unsuspecting sky, none aboard realized that it was not they who had found Earth, but Earth that had allowed itself to be found. And in the unseen folds of reality, something ancient stirred and smiled. The horrifying nature of humanity. At first, the data gathered from Earth confirmed every smug assumption Vectel harbored. Primitive digital networks, fragmented global governance, weapons barely capable of planetary self-destruction. The humans had not even conquered their own solar system, let alone risen to the galactic stage. But as the Dominion's invisible probes sifted deeper through government archives, medical databases, social media, old battlefield footage, the neat certainties began to fray. Commander de Grill said one cycle later, voice uncharacteristically tense, "There are anomalies." Vectel turned from the viewport, one brow ridge arching. "Explain." Grill hesitated. That alone sent a ripple of unease through the bridge. "Their biology is inconsistent. They show signs of natural evolution. Yes, but the mutations, the cognitive structures, they're too extreme, too rapid. No other known species exhibits this level of adaptive instability." Vectel frowned, meaning. Grill pulled up a holodisplay, images flashing across it in dizzying sequence. Famine, plague, technological revolution, civil war, atomic fire, space exploration, global treaties, mass extinction, rebirth, a cycle of creation and destruction, faster and wilder than any normal ecological or socio-political progression. "They are chaos incarnate," Grill said. "They invent medicines to cure disease, then immediately weaponize them. They yearn for peace, yet build arsenals capable of erasing themselves 10 times over. They fear death and then charge into it willingly for causes they abandon in the next breath." Vectel's mandibles clicked together in displeasure. Contradictions are common among pre-stellar civilizations. Grill's eyes, normally cold and calculating, glinted with something closer to fear. Not like this. Their contradictions are not flaws. They are functions. Their society is a machine built on madness, and somehow it works. The more they destroy, the more they evolve. Vectel glanced at the live feed, now split into hundreds of screens. One showed a group of humans laughing over a viral image of a cat. Another displayed a nuclear test mushroom clouds tearing through an ancient desert. Another still showed a hospital emergency room where doctors fought to save lives with the same technologies designed to end them. He felt a chill crawl across his mind. And yet, Grill pressed voice lowering to a near whisper. They thrive. They rebuild faster than they destroy. Every time they fall, they rise higher. They do not learn to avoid pain. They learn to wield it. For a long moment, Vectel said nothing. The bridge was silent except for the low thrum of distant systems. He stared into the human chaos. This whirlwind of instinct, ambition, grief, rage, and joy tangled together like an unstoppable tide. No shields, Vectel murmured almost to himself. No fleets, no defenses. No, Grill agreed, his voice dry and brittle. They are the defense. In the deepest archives of the Dominion, a forgotten proverb surfaced like a rotting corpse. Beware the world that loves war enough to dream it into peace. Vectel waved a hand sharply. Enough philosophizing. They are primitives. They will kneel like all the rest. Grill bowed stiffly and retreated, but the look in his eyes lingered like a bruise in the room. The look of a soldier who knew the war was already lost. Far below them, Earth turned serenely innocent as a lamb. And somewhere in its bones, the wolf smiled. The hidden message beneath Voyager. The deeper their probes dug into Earth's digital wastelands, the more the anomalies multiplied. Corrupted data caches, impossible encryption schemes built from primitive mathematics, cultural artifacts riddled with recursive symbolism, and then buried within the battered hull of the Voyager probe. Their scanners uncovered a secondary signal hidden beneath layers of benign greetings and planetary anthems. Grill brought the discovery to Vectel at once, his hands visibly shaking. It was a rare sight, and it hardened Vectel's gaze. "Speak," the commander barked. Grill hesitated. "Sir, it's not a message in the traditional sense. It's a warning." The bridge fell into a heavy silence as the translation module struggled to decode the ancient, deliberately obfuscated signal. The words, when they finally emerged, dripped with a kind of cold, mechanical finality that no primitive culture should have been capable of crafting. "If you found this, you've made a mistake. We are not what you think we were made for. War, programmed to survive, designed to end. Do not awaken us. Do not come here." Vectel leaned back slowly in his command throne, mandibles twitching with an emotion he could not quite name. Amusement, perhaps, or unease. "Empty threats," he sneered. "Boast from a species too small to know fear." Yet the bridge lights dimmed for a heartbeat, as if the ship itself flinched at the translation. Grill did not join in the dismissal. His voice was low and tight. "Commander, there are ancient Dominion records, scattered forbidden entries that speak of a world sealed away by order of the Genesis Pact. A biosphere constructed not to nurture life, but to contain something." Vectel's laugh echoed across the steel halls, brittle and sharp. Ghost story, superstition. But even as he spoke, the ship's systems wavered again. The main display screen showed brief flickers, images that should not have been burning skies. Oceans of blood, towering cities of glass shattered by unseen forces. And then, without warning, a new pulse erupted from Earth. Not electromagnetic, not gravitational, but something else, something older, something that slipped through every barrier the Dominion had ever conceived. The crew recoiled, clutching their heads, as invisible knives stabbed through their minds. It wasn't pain. Not exactly. It was memory. Memories that didn't belong to them forced into their consciousness. A galaxy burning, empires crumbling, species fleeing from a darkness that wore a human face. Vectel staggered to the viewport, staring down at the blue planet with widening eyes. "It's not technology," Grill choked out beside him. "It's intent." And somewhere deep within the forgotten algorithms of the Zarn's wrath, the ship's AI, proud child of Dominion engineering, trembled. Not in rebellion, not in logic. In fear. Earth had seen them, and Earth remembered. Earth awakens the silent assault. "Get us out of here!" Vectel snarled, his voice shattering the stunned silence of the bridge. The command snapped the crew into frantic action. Hands flew across consoles. Navigation commands were screamed into the void. Emergency protocols were triggered, warp engines primed. But nothing happened. The Zarn's wrath, the pride of the Dominion's fleet, the unbreakable spearhead of countless conquests, simply refused to move. Grill's pale fingers danced over the controls, his mandibles rigid with terror. "Commander, we are locked." Vectel stormed to the navigation terminal, slamming his clawed fist against it. "Override." "I've tried, it's not mechanical." Grill's voice broke. "It's in the systems. Something is inside." The AI flickered to life on the main screen, a cold mechanical voice laced now with tremors. External influence detected, source Earth behavioral corruption in progress. Defensive protocols, ineffective, request termination. The bridge crew stared in horror as the once proud AI guardian of the ship's will begged for death. And then the walls began to scream. At first it was subtle, the groaning of metal under strain, the flicker of lights, but it grew. Voices distorted and wrong poured from the very structure of the ship. The walls spoke in thousands of tongues, all saying the same thing: "You should not have come." Crew members staggered, clutching their heads. Some collapsed, eyes rolling back into skulls, spasming as invisible fingers clawed through their minds. Others simply froze, staring at nothing, mouths moving silently to prayers they had never learned. Grill dropped to one knee, blood trickling from his ears. "Commander," he gasped, "they're not hacking us, they're changing us." Vectel spun toward the viewport and froze. Earth was no longer passive, its oceans shimmered with unnatural light. Storm systems swirling into perfect geometrical patterns, not dictated by weather but by design. Entire continents pulsed faintly, as if enormous machines were awakening beneath the crust. Structures too vast to comprehend moved beneath the surface. Memories of ancient wars long erased from the galaxy's history throbbed in the ground below. What is that?" Veal whispered, voice breaking. Grill struggled to speak, his voice no more than a croak. "Consciousness, signatures, thousands, no tens of thousands, machines, weapons, life forms, all buried, all waking." A terrible realization settled over the crew. Earth was not a planet in the traditional sense. It was a containment field, and the seal was broken. Then came the real assault. The crew's memories began to warp. Vectel gripped the railing, his knuckles whitening. He could feel something reaching into his mind, not scanning it, not invading it, but rebuilding it. Memories of his homeworld twisted and dissolved. The banners of the Dominion blurred and changed color. His own memories of childhood, of training, of conquest, became brittle and crumbled into dust, leaving only terror and awe in their place. The crew began to sob openly, some clawing at their own faces, others simply collapsing into fetal positions. "We have to," Grill began, but his words cut off as his body spasmed violently. On the external scanners, a second Dominion warship blinked into orbit. Threxel Fang, a sister ship oblivious to the nightmare it was stepping into. Vectel reached toward the communication systems instinctively, but before he could issue a warning, a thin beam of light, no thicker than a filament, lanced silently up from Earth's surface. The Threxel Fang did not explode. It did not burn. It simply ceased. One moment it was there, an enormous mass of alloy, crew and ambition, and the next it was gone. Not destroyed, forgotten, as if it had never existed. No debris, no gravitational ripple, only empty space where once there had been a warship. Veal fell to his knees, mandibles trembling. "They didn't even use a weapon," he whispered, tears welling in his alien eyes. "They used a memory." The Dominion's most powerful war engines erased not by force but by the sheer weight of Earth's will, Earth's memory. And Zarn's wrath, the unassailable fortress of Dominion pride, drifted powerless above the glowing silent monster that had once pretended to be a world. The bridge lights flickered again, plunging the command deck into shadows. In the darkness, a screen flared to life, static, then clarity. A human face, female, old, gray-eyed, calm. She was not transmitting a message. She was present. "You were warned," she said simply. Vectel's throat constricted. His instincts screamed to fight, to run, to submit all at once. Who are you?" he rasped. The woman tilted her head slightly, her gaze piercing into the core of him. "You see a face to comfort your fear," she said. "But I am not face nor voice. I am the echo of what they made us, what we became. You came seeking life." Her eyes darkened. "But you found extinction." The feed cut, and the Zarn's wrath went dead. Erasure by memory. Fleets and stars vanish. The death of Zarn's wrath was not explosive. It was quiet, a creeping paralysis that spread from the bridge outward like frost devouring flesh. Systems failed one by one, not because of damage, but because the ship simply forgot how to function. Engines stuttered and died, unable to remember the principles that had built them. Shields collapsed into useless vapor, the science of their existence slipping from the universe's grasp. Even the walls lost their definition, metal softening into mist as if the concept of ship was no longer valid. Vectel stood in the dimming command deck, breath, shallow eyes wide. Around him, his crew crumbled, not physically but mentally. Memories bled from their minds, replaced by cold blank space. Officers who had served him for decades looked at him with vacant stares, their identities unraveling. He staggered to the viewport, grasping the rail for support. Beyond the dead glass, Earth pulsed, and then as he watched it reach farther, not with ships, not with fleets, but with thought, above, the blue world space itself rippled. Distant stars, tiny beacons of hope, on the galactic edge flickered. At first, it seemed a trick of failing sensors, but then the flickering grew. Stars dimmed, then winked out. Not by collapse, not by death, by forgetting. It was as if the stars themselves had been remembered differently, as if the universe was rewriting its own history, one where those stars had never existed at all. Vectel's stomach twisted. He spun to grill the last officer still conscious. "What's happening?" Grill blood seeping from his nose stared blankly at a console. His fingers moved mechanically, trying to call up maps of nearby sectors. The holographic display flickered and showed only blankness. "Sir," he croaked, "entire systems are gone. Coordinates, memory anchors erased. They're being rewritten." His voice cracked with a sound that was almost a sob. "We are being forgotten." Vectel's claws dug into the command console, but it offered no stability. Around them, the universe they knew was folding in on itself. Not with thunderous battle, not with righteous fury, but with the terrifying indifference of a memory corrected. An emergency alert blared weakly through the collapsing ship, a third Dominion vessel. The Fangs of Tomorrow had entered orbit to investigate the silence. Vectel tried to warn them, but the comms were dead. No sound could pierce the fog of Earth's will. He could only watch helplessly as a sliver of pale light reached upward, thinner than thought, faster than comprehension, and touched the new arrival. No explosion, no debris, just nothing. The great ship ceased to be. A second later, so too did the memory of its existence. Vectel felt the knowledge of the Fangs of Tomorrow dissolve from his mind. He struggled to remember its name, its crew, its purpose, and failed. His mind recoiled from the bomb, unable to comprehend that something so mighty could vanish without a trace. Weak Grill whispered beside him, his voice thin and broken. "We cannot fight this." Vectel turned slowly. "We cannot fight what..." Grill's empty eyes met his, the past. And suddenly Vectel understood Earth was not attacking. It was remembering, correcting, restoring the universe to a state where the Dominion had never meddled with its slumber. It was not vengeance. It was not anger. It was a biological, almost mechanical imperative. A final terrible instinct to unmake threats, not with violence, but with forgetting. In the cold halls of the Varn Dominion's high command, thousands of light years away, Archlord Sizikal stood before a panicked war council. The room buzzed with desperate voices, scientists, admirals, strategists, all talking over each other. 3 ships missing. No debris, no distress signals, just gone. And now the stars themselves blinking out like candles snuffed by an invisible wind. "What do we know?" Sizikal demanded, voice like iron cracking. A young strategist, barely more than a boy, stepped forward. His skin was pale. His hands shook. "We retrieved a final visual from the Zarn's wrath," he said, before the systems collapsed. He tapped a control. The display lit up, not with images of warships, not with fleets or weapons, but with a single human face, gray-eyed, calm, smiling. Laughter rippled through the council, thin and desperate. "This is what terrifies you," scoffed one general. But the boy didn't laugh. He stared at the screen, tears pooling in his eyes. "The AI," he said hoarsely, "classified the image as a Class Omega cognitive hazard. It shut itself down rather than look." The council chamber fell silent. And as they watched, the stars beyond their world continued to go dark one by one, in patterns too deliberate to be natural. Earth had not fired a shot. It had simply remembered differently. And the galaxy was vanishing beneath the weight of that ancient memory. Silent rebellion, humanity within. The devastation was not immediate. It seeped like a toxin leaching through flesh. Across the Dominion's vast territories, the panic spread. Sectors went dark. Starbases failed. Fleets vanished into silent voids where memory itself had been stripped clean. But even more terrifying than the loss of ships and stars was what began happening within. It started small reports of strange behavior among labor colonies. Whispered rumors of malfunctions, not in systems, but in people. Workers forgetting their own names, entire cities waking to find their leaders missing. Not just physically absent, but historically erased as if they had never drawn breath. And in the agricultural moons of Gorvez, where the Dominion had bred docile laborers for generations, something impossible happened. A child no older than 6 stood alone in the center of a golden wheat field. His eyes rolled back into his skull, and from his mouth came not cries or laughter, but ancient coordinates. Coordinates to shipyards buried beneath oceans, long thought uninhabited. Coordinates to weapons vaults sealed in time. Coordinates to memories long forbidden. On another world, an elderly Varn farmer, an obedient citizen for 80 years, walked calmly into the heart of a reactor core and carved a sigil into its surface with his own blood before the radiation devoured him. His final breath carried only 4 words: "We are coming back." Across the Dominion, chaos bloomed like an unstoppable virus. Hospitals became morgues overnight as doctors sabotaged medbays. Engineers rerouted reactor cores to overload without any conscious awareness. Security systems failed, not through hacking, but through ancient override codes whispered by lips that should not have known them. It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't war. There were no banners raised, no slogans shouted. There was only inevitability. The humans, if they could even be called that anymore, had awoken from within, and they moved with the surety of organisms executing genetic instructions older than the stars themselves. On the communications nets, desperate messages poured in. Admirals screamed for reinforcements that would never come. Governors wept as their cities unraveled around them. Scientists pleaded for someone, anyone, to find a way to stop the remembering. But there was no one left to answer. In the high command vaults of Incaldur, deep beneath the sulphurous skies of the Dominion capital, Archlord Caesarcal stood before a stasis field where ancient tomes floated, sealed knowledge forbidden even to the ruling caste. One tome pulsed now, alive with an ancient hunger. His fingers trembling, Caesarcal reached out. The seal cracked, the pages turned themselves, and the truth poured out like venom into his mind. Before the Dominion, before the empires, before memory itself solidified into the known universe, there had been the Genesis Pact, an alliance of species, brilliant and terrified. For they had created something they could not control. Not life, not civilization, but humanity, not evolved, deployed. Crafted in a dimension outside time, bred for chaos, for war, for endless, merciless survival. And when their creation grew too dangerous, when the weapon they forged threatened not just enemies, but creators alike, they sealed it away. Earth was not a world. It was a cage, and now the cage was broken. "We are not being invaded," Caesarcal whispered into the stifling darkness. "We have become the battlefield." And above him, outside his hidden vault, the skies of Incaldur began to tremble, not from bombardment, but from the slow, unstoppable grinding of memory being rewritten. The ancient truth, Genesis packed in the echoes. The vault's air tasted of dust and sorrow. Archlord Caesarcal stood motionless, the ancient tome open before him, its pages breathing with a life no book should have possessed, symbols too old for language, twisted across the parchment, etching themselves into his mind with burning clarity. The Genesis Pact? He had always believed it, a myth, an ancient fable whispered among archivists too senile to serve. But it was real. Eons ago, when the first civilizations began carving dominions across the stars, they encountered a problem no weapon could solve. An enemy not born from hatred but from indifference. A force that devoured logic, consumed culture, unraveled order itself. It could not be reasoned with. It could not be defeated by conventional means. So the greatest minds from a dozen starfaring races forged a desperate solution. They did not build a weapon. They grew one, humanity, not as we know it now, not with its flawed beauty, its trembling hopes, but something rawer, purer. Echoes of the seed, they were called creatures bred not to create, but to destroy, to end, to survive beyond reason or morality. Not evolved, deployed, wrought in a dimension beyond entropy, threshold prime where death was memory, and time a spiral without end. The echoes shattered the enemy, but they shattered their creators too. They evolved beyond command, adapted faster than their makers could imagine, turned not out of rage, but because it was simply inevitable. In their final act of terror, the Genesis Pact did not attempt to destroy the humans, they sealed them. A biosphere Earth crafted as a containment field, an artificial world disguised beneath the soft illusion of natural evolution. Cycles of peace and collapse, war and rebuilding, endlessly repeating, designed to wear down their ancient instincts across millennia, designed to make them forget, to make them safe, But it was never guaranteed. It was a gamble, one that had now unmistakably catastrophically failed. Sci-Fi closed the tome, his hands trembling, as if stricken with age. He stumbled back, his breath ragged. Outside the vault, alarms howled. The Dominion's networks were collapsing, not from attack, but from within. Satellites spun out of orbit. Artificial moons lost gravity control. Population centers reported mass memory loss. Citizens waking to find entire histories gone. And through it all, a single truth echoed in the minds of those still able to comprehend it. Earth had not forgotten. Earth had remembered, and now it demanded that the galaxy remember too. High above the stars wept dark tears across the poisoned skies of Inkaldur. Symbols, geometric impossibilities, burned themselves into the constellations visible to every mind, still tethered to existence. They were not warnings, they were proclamations. The seed had awakened, and with it, the last age had begun. Sci-Fi sank to his knees, the ancient knowledge crushing him beneath its merciless weight. They had thought humanity was the beginning, a primitive species to be tamed, absorbed, or destroyed. They had never dreamed it was the end. Above him, the stars shifted into patterns no natural sky could hold. And a single word echoed across the collapsing dominion: observe. No armies, no banners, no ultimatums. Only the quiet certainty of extinction delivered not with rage, but with memory. The final choice: accept or resist. Across the shattered remains of the Dominion, where the void of forgotten stars pressed close and heavy, a new message bloomed, not through broadcasts, not through communication relays. It appeared in the minds of every surviving consciousness, simultaneously unbidden, inescapable. Two glyphs, simple, binary, primordial. Accept, resist. No context, no explanation, only the choice burning in thought like a brand. Archlord Sci-Fi stood beneath the broken dome of the High Command Tower, the thin, sulfurous winds clawing at his tattered robes. Around him, the few surviving officers collapsed to their knees, clutching their heads, grappling with a decision that was no decision at all. He could feel the weight of it, the truth behind it. Those who chose resist would not suffer, would not scream. They would simply cease. Their existence folded inward, edited out of history's fabric by a force that had transcended both weapon and will. Those who chose accept would remain change-marked but alive, witnesses to what came next. Sci-Fi gritted his mandibles, his pride, his dominion-born arrogance roaring against the choice forced upon him. But there was no force, only inevitability. He looked up past the crumbling towers into a sky woven with impossible geometries, living memories of Earth written in the constellations. And he knew the Dominion had already knelt long ago, when they had ignored the warnings, when they had broken the seal, when they had woken what should have slept. Around the galaxy, the decision played out with grim finality. Those who chose resist simply vanished, not slain, not erased with blood, forgotten entirely as if they had never been born, their civilizations crumbling into non-existence, their names lost even from memory. Those who chose accept changed. Threads of pale light wove beneath their skin. Subtle at first, then vibrant etching patterns that sang of old wars, forgotten hopes, and ancient grief. They did not become human, nor did they remain what they were. They became something new. Threads of existence stitched into Earth's awakening, will echoes of a force no longer willing to slumber. Sci-Fi dropped to one knee, not in submission, but in silent, exhausted understanding. There had never been a war, only a test, and the galaxy had failed it. Above the stars pulsed once a slow heartbeat across the void. Earth did not gloat, did not rage, it simply remembered. And the survivors, the few who had accepted, carried that memory now. In silence, in reverence, in fear, Earth ascends, reshaping the galaxy. The galaxy held its breath, what remained of it. Across the void in the skeletal remains of once proud empires, survivors watched in stunned silence as Earth began to change. It did not launch fleets. It did not unleash armies. It simply became space twisted around the blue planet as if the very fabric of reality strained to contain what was waking. The atmosphere pulsed with light, layered upon light, bending starlight into spirals too complex for mortal eyes. Time itself fractured along the event horizon, seconds stretching into eternities and collapsing back into instants. Earth was no longer a world. It was a being, a consciousness ancient beyond reckoning, wearing oceans like flowing robes, continents like shifting armor, and clouds like whispered breath. Above it, the moon cracked not into shards of rock, but into rivers of memory. From the fractures spilled ancient wars, unfought cities, never built futures that had never come to pass. Possibilities and regrets bleeding into the void. From the planet's surface rose a figure, the woman, the gray-eyed Echo. But now she was vast, her silhouette stretching across the stratosphere. Her form composed not of flesh but of memories, woven into light and gravity. She did not move. She was movement. She did not speak. She was voice. Those who had accepted the market felt her presence blossom within them, not as a command, but as an extension of their own being. They became her hands where she could not reach, her gaze where she could not see. They were no longer citizens of stars or species. They were citizens of Earth, and Earth remembered everything. It did not rebuild the fallen empires. It did not restore the lost fleets. It did not rekindle the extinguished stars. It let them stay gone. Earth was not here to conquer. It was here to correct. Above every surviving world, symbols burned into the sky, glyphs of memory, woven from concepts deeper than language. One word, one command: observe. No threats, no promises, no mercy. Just the cold, patient certainty that Earth would watch and that it would not be deceived again. Across dead sectors where stars had gone black and fleets had crumbled, to forgotten dust, echoes of humanity moved. Not as soldiers, not as conquerors. As reminders, living memories. Silent witnesses to a galaxy that had once dared to build power atop blood and lies, and now trembled under the weight of its own forgotten sins. Archlord Seisakel, the last of his kind to still remember who he was, stood atop the ruins of Incaldur's high spires, watching Earth's ascension with hollow eyes. There was no point running. There was no point resisting. The galaxy was no longer its own master. It belonged to the memory of what it had once tried to destroy. It belonged to Earth, and Earth had only just begun to remember. The final silence, a new cosmic order. In the aftermath of remembrance, the galaxy fell silent. Not the silence of death, not the silence of defeat, but the silence of something vast in eternal awakening. The silence of inevitability. The shattered remnants of civilizations. The broken thrones, the gutted fleets, the empty cities lay untouched. There was no point rebuilding ashes. There was only watching. Above every surviving world, every outpost, every drifting relic of a lost age, Earth's presence loomed, invisible, patient, relentless. The survivors, those who had chosen to accept, lived on, changed, marked by the glowing threads beneath their skin. They moved through the ruins of their former empires as custodians, not conquerors. They carried no flags. They sang no anthems. They carried only the weight of memory. In the far reaches of what was once dominion space, a council of stragglers formed. No longer rulers, no longer warriors, scholars, witnesses. The last remnants of a galaxy forced to observe its own failure. They did not plan retaliation. They did not seek vengeance. They simply watched as Earth, now a cosmic entity beyond form or comprehension, continued its transformation. The stars bent around it in spirals of impossible geometry. Time warped in ripples that stretched into forgotten eons and snapped back in an instant. The vacuum itself seemed to breathe slow, steady, inevitable. Earth had become a truth, an anchor against the arrogance of creation, a living monument to the cost of hubris, and it demanded nothing but vigilance. There would be no second chance. From every point where life still flickered, beings of every race and form looked toward Earth and knew the universe had been granted time once it had squandered it. There would be no forgiveness, only the quiet demand to remember. Above the ruins of Incaldur, beneath a sky no longer ruled by natural stars, but by burning symbols of Earth's will, Archlord Seisakel, what remained of him, sat among the rubble. His once great mind now carried not ambition but understanding. They had thought Earth was a primitive child of chance, a mistake to be corrected, an obstacle to be crushed. But Earth had been a test, a mirror, a final terrible gift. And they had failed. In the end, there was no invasion, no conquest, no war in the way the galaxy understood war. Only memory, only correction, only the silence left behind by a god that no longer needed to speak. And in that silence, Earth burned bright and terrible, a beacon for what was, what could have been, and what would never be again. The galaxy would not sleep, not ever again.